Okay, and we're live. Let me make sure. Let's see. Okay, we're good. Okay. Welcome everybody. Good afternoon. Good morning, wherever you may be. Today we're on a unplanned, unscheduled live for the No and Never podcast because this will be added to my YouTube. So I just want to introduce myself first. I am Kristen Nicole Mann, and I do have a podcast called The No and Never, and it's what's happening now. And so today I have my guest, Mrs. Hampton. We are going to be talking about a topic that she brought aware to me. Because hi, CJ. Because I have been lately doing some different things, really kind of like stumbling into the education sector by default. As you know, I'm a visual artist, and so my route has taken me into school settings, which I never thought would be the case. And I'm noticing these things with kids and trying to understand and get a better like a sense of knowledge about what's going on with kids after the pandemic. Now, if you do or don't know, I had Mrs. Hampton on my podcast, what now, like 2 years ago? A
Yeah,
year?
yeah, it was like maybe last year. I want to say
Yeah, that was
last
a long
year.
time. Yeah. So there's been a lot that's happened since she's been on. So I will let her introduce herself and then I will lead the conversation. I'm only asking questions today. This is for information purposes only. So we're not diagnosing nobody. We're just giving out the information. And I want her to also share her new workbook. So, Lakeelia, if you want to introduce yourself and tell them why you're on here about this topic.
So, hi, I'm LaKeely Hampton. I am a licensed master social worker, currently working on my licensed clinical social worker license. So y'all pray for me because that's like another year and a half and some thousands of hours, but we in it for the long haul. Currently, I'm actually in transition. So currently, I work for Fort Worth ISD. And I am the intervention specialist. So we primarily deal with like the socio emotional, mental health needs of our students. So I see a lot. I'm like the middle person between like the teachers and admin, on top of the teachers and admins and students and families. So I'm kind of like the person that brings it like all together. So, and you guys are gonna see my son kind of pop in and out, mama's boy. Um,
So also tell them about the new
yeah, I was going
workbook.
there. So, also, I have two workbooks. So I have the Understanding Mental Health Through a Relationship with God, and then the other is a coping skills workbook for kids. So they kind of intertwine. Okay, son, you go in your room. I will bring you a snack. And I'm a mom. So, but the Understanding Mental Health Through
Yeah, we don't care.
Relationship with God workbook, it intertwines things that I have gone through with that affect my mental health and how I tied in my walk with Christ with it. So it includes like areas to just kind of process things, answering questions with exercises, scriptures, and prayer points. And then the coping skills is based on just things that I've applied with students that I work with. So feelings identification, understanding, what you're feeling and allowing them to like free write. So it kind of helps with that educational aspect as well. So yeah, I have both those books on sale. So if you want one or both, hit me up in the DMs, and I'll be sure to
Yes.
send that to you.
Yeah, so this is why this kind of flows into our conversation today because she put me onto a couple new terminologies of what uh could help or hinder kids because I have a little clip that I'm going to play for her, but I want to ask first, what was the term that you told me about earlier so that everyone knows why we're on here? Because everyone does not understand what social emotions are or even what's going on in the education system at all. So, can you just kind of describe a little bit of what you was telling me about that?
So social emotional learning, it's kind of new. I'm not gonna say kind of, it is new. So it intertwines our emotions and the social aspects. So looking at our environment and looking at our emotions, our mental health as well, and how they combine. And so in the schools, we teach social emotional learning because we want the kids to be able to apply, emotional regulation skills and conflict resolution and self awareness and basic decision making skills in all aspects of their lives, right? So at home, parents kind of tell their kids what to do. School, you have teachers telling kids what to do. But then when a kid has a meltdown, they don't know what to do. They don't know how to express it or communicate it. So we teach kids those skills. Yes. Okay. So we teach those kids those skills. And it's you would be surprised the lack of emotional intelligence that kids have, and it's also because like there's like a lack of communication and emotional intelligence amongst the parents. Like your kids are having a meltdown, it's like I don't know what to do, so you kind of give them what they want.
Mhm.
They're used to that, so when they go to school they don't know how to accept no, right? So we teach
Right,
those skills.
right.
You can bring it to me.
Okay, so you heard a little bit about what this all means. And again, I've kind of been thrusted into this space because I am having an issue not just with, one person or one student or two students. Like this is becoming an epidemic per se, where I'm having issues where kids are not freely able to express what is going on with them. It's a blockage there, and it was a problem when I first started dealing with schools, but now I'm seeing it like as a normal thing. Like people, I mean, kids are just they just don't want to express themselves. And so I was talking to Lakili about it, and I want to play this clip because I actually found short blurb of, I guess this journalist is against social emotional learning. So I want you to hear it, and I'm not going to play it on the screen, but I'll just play it. Hopefully you can hear. Let me bring it up. Okay.
One of the things I learned by talking to these researchers in the field of psychology was that it sounds innocuous. Ask a bunch of kids, how are they feeling? Well, what could be wrong with that, right? They could say, I'm feeling great. The problem is their mandate is teaching social emotional learning, teaching emotional regulation. Well, if you say, great, I feel great, there's nothing to teach. So it always heads in the direction. Now think of a time when you were in pain. Now think of a time when you felt bullied, when you felt left out. And then there's a second part. So that in itself increases dysregulation. By the way, it makes it harder for kids to achieve any tasks. We know this. Focusing on yourself makes it harder to achieve any hard task at all. I totally relate to this because I think that when I'm in a bad place, if I'm constantly thinking about poor me, poor me, poor me, what is the hardest thing I've gone through recently? Right? I actually become weaker as deficient. I can't even focus, right? Because I'm just focusing on how hard things are. And I'm an adult, right? So I can possibly better regulate myself. But for a child to just take them down this direction of like, poor me, what is the worst thing I could think about right now? And then, okay, now let's go to math class. Right, exactly. And here's the thing I want parents to know. It's different with adults. So as bad as that is for adults, it's worse with kids. And here's why. Because you're sitting around with your school counselor or teacher talking about your trauma. So now you've told a whole group of kids they've been traumatized. Is that word trauma, by the way, used in school? The teachers are using this term trauma. Sure. Their mandate is trauma-informed care. We need to accept that most kids have been traumatized. That's what they say. Traumatized by what? Well, they'll say they list it's based on a study, but it's a study that's been terribly abused. So they exaggerate the causes, but they'll say anything from climate change can cause trauma to police tactics can cause trauma. Being born Black can cause trauma. I talked to a wonderful teacher in public schools who was Black, and she finds it extraordinarily offensive that kids are told being born Black in America means you've been traumatized and you have an inherited trauma. The thing I want parents to know is if kids are sitting around and doing this with their counselor or teacher, well, who was supposed to keep them safe from trauma? The parents. So very naturally, it always leads to a criticism, or very naturally, it will lead to a criticism of the family, of the parents. Because of course, the next question is, where was your mom? Where was your dad when this was happening? Oh, she didn't have time to help me. Abigail, why do you think the system is doing this? Is it just a thing that is snowballing out of control because people are just losing right for wrong, the ability to discern what's the right thing to do for children? Or is there a nefarious industry that is trying to break the family, over medicate children, empower the government? What's your hunch on that? It's a great question. It's an important question. Is this on purpose? Is this as people acting together? Here's what I'll say. As a journalist, I try not to speculate on things that I don't have proof of. And here's what I have proof of. If you wanted to break kids down emotionally, if you wanted to break them down, there would be no better program than the program now in schools that goes under the headline mental health.
So that was a month ago that this interview took place, and I thought it was interesting. And I wanted to play it for you because I'm not going to get on here and not do my due diligence in finding like, are people against this? Are people for this? Like, well, it can't be people because it's the school's choice or the county's choice to implement this or not implement it. So what are your thoughts on the clip, and should it be implemented in school or should there be a drawback? What are you seeing?
So, first, listening to it, I'm not shocked because that has actually been a conversation that's happened in our district before. There are a lot of parents who've gone like to the school board saying, I don't want this SEL, because that's what they shorten it and call it SEL. I don't want my kid to participate in SEL lessons and things like that. And so, and they have different reasons, and some were, of course, like the trauma. What exactly are we touching on? Like, it needs to be something that's age appropriate. And is it age appropriate? And I think the thought is when we address things such as trauma or mental health, first of all, we don't use the word trauma when we're talking to a certain group of kids. Now, if
Mm,
you're talking to um, even high school, you kind of gauge the crowd, right? So I don't know if my crowd is emotionally and mentally mature enough for me to even use that term. Are you
mm,
outliers? Sure. But we don't generally use the term trauma. And the trauma informed that she spoke about is a type of training that we've gone to. So like I
mm,
have been trained on trauma informed care. So how to address if a kid has experienced trauma. But I've also done some studies on like trauma informed like CBT. So certain therapy skills that are directly related to the trauma. That's not what we do for everybody. There
okay.
that's not what we do for everybody. So it's not based on that. Um, so I'm not shocked. I do think that there needs to be something implemented in schools, in all schools, even if you want to change the language or put boundaries on it. So for us, we don't talk about suicide to
Mm,
elementary students. We do not.
okay.
We talk about safe and unsafe behaviors. We use different terminology. We don't say suicide. We might say hurting ourselves, and if we don't want to use hurt, some people use like, because there's a thing called harm reduction. So some people like harm reduction, like how can I do the least harm. And then there's some
Mm,
people that's all together just like we're just not going to use it. They'll say being nice to ourselves. So if I'm talking to a group of kindergartners, I'm not going to say, oh, we shouldn't hurt ourselves, friend. I'm going to say we need to be nice to ourselves. What does being nice to
right.
ourselves look like? And so we talk about healthy things that we should do with ourselves. If I'm talking to a group of third through fifth graders, I might use the language hurting ourselves because they're a bit older. Some of them cognitively can get to that level where they can have that conversation. But again, you gauge the room. The reason why I say I think it should be in school though is because it ties in a lot of what kids deal with. Yes, they deal with things in the home, but school, they're interacting with people from so many different walks of life. They're encountering so many different other things that they probably aren't dealing with at home. They're having to learn to communicate differently depending on the crowds that they're in or depending on the teacher. And so why not teach them ways to regulate their emotions? If my 8-year old is okay with being at home with me, but then she has to go into a big school with like three, four, 500 other kids and she's experiencing anxiety. She needs to know how to emotionally regulate herself with her
Right.
anxiety. That's not to say she's diagnosed anxiety. We're not diagnosing kids and placing these labels. This is us. Yes, sir. Yes, go get snacks. This is not us saying that, oh, we're diagnosing your kid with this mental disorder. That's not what we're doing. We're teaching them that if you were to deal with a real world emotion or experience, here are some tips or here are some coping skills to be able to manage that. That's essentially what socio emotional learning is. It's not to diagnose. It's not to place trauma and send you off to, like she said, math class. Like, oh, we're gonna process why you were depressed yesterday. That's not the language.
Right.
That's not how it's taught. It's really more character education, building healthy characters.
So do you think, with that being said, do you think schools are more pressure to create the safe spaces outside of the home? Or is it more communicated to the parents like, hey, maybe start this at home so it's not as hard for us to go there with the students and make them feel uncomfortable? Because let's take a student that's coming from a home where their parents may not even be there when they get there.
Mhm.
And then there's nobody asking them about, homework or how was your day? No form of communication outside of like, okay, did you do the bare minimum to, get through school? What do you see in the school? Like, is it pressure or is it conversations with the parents? What is it?
I think it's a mix. It depends on, again, we're thinking age groups. So me working in
Mm,
elementary schools, um, we let parents know because they have the option to opt out. It's not an opt in. It's like it's an opt out. So they have the option at the beginning of the year when they're registering their student if you don't want them to participate in certain things. So opting out. There's a generic
okay.
character education lesson that classrooms get, but when
Hmm.
a kid is being specifically, I don't like to use the word targeted, but they're like a target student. So, like in my case, tier three behaviors. If they're a kid who has reoccurring behavior concerns, academic concerns, meetings can take place. I send a consent form home, and I'll say, "Hey, here's all the things that we talk about." I don't go outside of that realm. I stick within the realm, and it's usually, like I said, self awareness. I don't even use terms like anxiety or depression, none of that. It's more of like character education language. And the parents,
Mm-hmm.
because the parents know that, their student was identified as tier 3 or tier 2, because tier 2 kind of teeters on the line. um Most of the time I've had positive outcomes of parents like, yes please, because I am seeing some things at home, or they're saying yes please because I'm tired of the school calling me. They don't do this at home, I
Mm,
don't see these issues at home, but
right.
I don't want the school calling me. So I think it's a mix. It is a little bit of pressure, but I also think that
Mm,
it is to reinforce to parents, hey, this is what I'm doing with your kid, and this is what I've noticed worked, and you can implement it at home. But it just depends. It depends on, you know, age group. It also depends on the relationship, because
right.
you can't just work with a child and not involve the parent as best as you can. Are there some parents that are like, I don't want nothing to do with it, I don't care, just don't have the school calling me? There are, but there are some cases where there are parents who, they know something's off, or they know something's wrong, or they know their kid needs this extra skill. They just don't know what to do. And so they're like, we're gonna
Right.
leave it up to the person that's there. Think about it. Kids spend about the same amount of time at school they do at home, if you really look at it. So their second home is school. So why not
Mm-hmm.
implement it in the place where, and I know like a lot of people hate using like indoctrination. I don't like to use that term either, but it's like they're in an environment, they're in a safe environment, they're amongst peers, whether it be positive or negative relationships, but there are healthy adults there that are willing to step in and give my kids some tools. So it makes life easier
Right.
for me when we're at home.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because I was watching something else, a TED talk about safe spaces for Black boys, and he was talking about like the language wasn't really relevant in school when he was in school per se, because he's around our age, like their early 30s, and he was just saying how his dad was the only one that kind of told him like, hey, after middle school, you may lose some friends to death, or they might get locked up, or some people may have babies before y'all are adults. And he just was like really taken back by that because he felt like his dad popped a bubble. And he didn't fault him for it. He said, I'm glad he did say it, beforehand. But I kind of thought, was that really necessary to go that extreme? Or I don't want to say like we should always protect and not be realistic about the world. But I'm like, would you have said that a different way instead of just going for the gusto and just scaring him straight. I just thought that was interesting.
I think it depends on the kid and the
Mm,
relationship you have with the kid. So there are some kids I've worked with that they'll tell me like, Miss, I don't know why you're talking to me like that. Like,
mm,
in a sense of like, I come very soft and they
mhm.
don't take it serious. So it's like, okay,
Right.
now I got to kind of push it in a little harder, because
Mhm.
that's the way that they have been built. That's how they've been
Mm,
raised.
okay.
We wouldn't have said that normally. So I have these conversations with usually fifth grade boys and girls before they transition to middle school, right? So we always
Okay.
talk about what middle school life is like, how it's different from elementary. And one of the things that I do tell them that people that you're friends with now, you may not be friends with when middle school comes or when high school comes.
Yeah.
I don't say
Mhm.
those. I don't tell them like, oh, they might have babies. I don't. I'll just explain to them like your life is going to take you on a different path, right? So you might change your goals. You might change your outlook, and they don't. And so
Mhm.
you have to make the hard decision on whether or not you want to continue to be friends with them. And
Right.
and tell them too, like, hey, there's going to be some friendships as well that you have to cut off because it's not healthy. So I would have said they're
Mhm.
not healthy, or they might not be making the right choices that match up to your goal. And so
Mm.
that's a better way of saying it versus kind of nitpicking at those things. Okay, ask Amaya for help.
Yeah. And he was kind of saying like his dad, grew up like that. So he wasn't gonna fault the way that he put it. But I do think for Black boys, there isn't still a language that is getting used to for them. Like, it's kind of inconsistent when it comes to safe spaces for Black boys or even
Mhm.
for Black girls. And I'm not making it a color thing, but it's just we come from different backgrounds. We do things different from Caucasian families, Asian families, Spanish families. And so when you have all these dynamics mixed together in school, it can be hard for a student to know how to communicate, what to say, like know all those emotions that they have.
Yes.
Um, you know, and I mean, we do that as adults,
Yeah, I was gonna
but
say that's us.
we don't get to have, you know, those questions asked all the time. We gotta just have to do it because we have to go to work, we have to make money, you know, all those things. So do you find that safe spaces work before middle school, or should they be more implemented like from kindergarten or preschool?
I would probably say starting around, I wouldn't even say pre-K or K because they're still kind of learning. Um,
Mm,
Everybody's their friend. Like,
yeah.
even like, so like, for example, even with my son, him being in pre-K, like in the morning, he'll be like, Mom, we didn't share our feelings today. How are you feeling?
Oh,
But I know that's not the language for all of his friends. Yes. Okay. So I would say like first grade is really when they're able to start having actual conversations.
mm,
Feeling identification. You can start feeling identification as early as like kinder. But
okay.
like really understanding, I think it's about first grade when they're like 6, 7. That's when
Yeah.
it becomes like a okay, I should probably start implementing, some type of safe space for them to say, like, my friend pushed me today, and that's not a good friend. When they're pre-K and K, that's just we're playing rough. It may not be that I don't know, or this person is mean or I'm being bullied, but about first grade is when they really start to understand the difference between like the friend. I call it like the friend versus foe.
Mm,
Like, is this a safe thing that's happening to me or is it not safe? Um,
right.
am I really okay or am I not okay? And I know a lot of people discount kids actually knowing if they're okay and they're not okay, but they do know. If they're able to
Mm,
come to school and tell me at home that they feel afraid or they feel scared,
right.
they can't label it as anxiety, but they know that something's not right and I don't feel safe.
Mm,
Then we should be able to implement safe spaces for them that young, because what it does is set them up to be able to regulate their emotions by the time they get to middle school. You've created the language and the communication. So when you get to middle school, you don't have a kid that becomes a recluse out of nowhere and you're trying to figure out why. Or they have like
right.
all these erratic behaviors. They were really smart when they were first, second, third grade, but by the time they got to fourth and fifth and up, like they're acting out, their grades are poor. There were signs there, but because we discount the fact that they actually can say something's wrong, so
Hmm.
we do them a disservice. So
So do you think the teachers help with this implementation? Like, do you find that maybe they're more quick to send the kids to the counselors versus like trying to figure out, because we know they don't have time
yeah,
really to stop and say what's wrong, what are you, you know, what are you feeling, what it could, because they're on a track that they have to go by what their principal says, or the county, you know, education system. Like, you have to have these kids on this track by XYZ. So do you find the teachers that are kind of against this, are they more harm, or are like harmful to
I
the
think
child developing their emotions?
I think it's a mix. I've encountered teachers that are really good about creating safe spaces in their classroom. Like they do morning check-ins. If they learn the
Mm,
students so well to where they're able to say, you know, this is a bit above my pay grade. I don't know how much I can really get from this kid, but I've noticed this, and they will send them to the principal or not the principal, the counselor's office. I've had teachers that'll pull me aside and say, "Hey, I've tried A, B, C, and D." I know for our district,
mm,
they really push teachers. It's not a requirement, but I think it depends on the campus. But they like to have teachers to have a calm down corner or a cool off station or something like that. And it doesn't have to be if a kid's acting out. It could just be, I noticed this kid is not working like they normally do, and maybe they need a reset. And that's another language that we
right,
use. We don't say like, oh, you need to get out or you're being put out. You just need a reset, you know.
right.
So I do see some teachers. The teachers that are not in support of it tend to be the ones that are kind of like they're just about business, which I get. Like I have a subject to teach. I have information and knowledge you need to know. Leave your feelings at the door. Come on in here and get this work done. Nobody's bothering you when you're in this classroom. So when you're outside the class, that becomes someone else's problem. So they try to tie it in with classroom management. But that's really
Mm,
hard when you're a teacher with like 25 kids, and out of the 25, 15 of them have all these different things going on, and you're trying to address it and teach a lesson and keep your lesson plan up, and they're monitoring you when you're coming into class. So, this is like
right.
jobs like mine are important because we can go in and observe a class. I don't have to show up to a classroom just because there's a problem. I used to do
Right.
observations. So kids I know generally have problems, or teachers that have tried, I'll go in and kind of see what the teachers, you know, have tried or are trying, and then I'll model it for them. And then I leave. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and then that they build that in however they see fit.
So let's reverse engineer it because I do have a couple more questions because this is like again, I don't see it talked about enough.
Mhm.
Especially post pandemic, we have a rise of children struggling in school for various reasons. It's not the same each student anymore. Like we can't just generalize, okay, this school has this problem, like it's all different things. Um Let's reverse engineer it though. The parents, what would you say would be the best practice for them to continue because maybe they didn't start having safe spaces in their home, or they're just one of those parents like, you're going to go to school, you're going to get this done, and we're going to start this over and over again every day.
Mhm.
And they don't really, they don't really see the point of this. What would you say to those type of parents as like a heads up from the education system, like help us out or like be a bridge? What would you say?
Um, be intentional about communicating with the kid and with the teacher. So if you knew this morning when you dropped off little Johnny was giving you the business beforehand. Like whatever it might be, it might have been crying and falling out. It might have just been complete, just like refusal to even come in the building. Give the teacher a heads up. Just communicate when you
Mhm,
do a drop off or send a message. Most teachers appreciate that because then that helps the teacher guide how they approach that kid. Because if a kid comes in
mhm,
the building and they have an attitude, it's like, which we have worked on with staff, like recognizing that everybody comes from a different situation, right? So you have to approach the kid with love, even though
mhm.
they're coming in with like, you know, whatever. So,
Right.
but it would be wonderful if parents could just say, "Hey, when I dropped off little Johnny, he didn't want to come to school today. You know, we had an argument or whatever. And if you don't want to tell your business, that's fine too. But just say he had a hard time coming into school today, so he might be a bit of a handful. That lets
Right.
teachers know, all hands on deck. I might need assistance, or let the teacher know as soon as little Johnny gets in, he might not be ready to go ahead and start work. Do we've
Mhm.
had some kids who struggle with that transition. You might have to give them like 10 minutes to eat breakfast, you
Right.
know, in the calm down corner before they're able to join the class, and don't take offense to it. I know it's business, 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 but in the long run, it's creating that. And then also for parents, actually check in with your kids by not just saying, did you have a good day or a bad day? You got a green today, you got a red today. I had to check myself on that because I started doing that with my pre-K, and I'm like, I'm not actually asking him what
Mm,
happened today. It's more of like a, oh, you got a red. But it might have been a red because, he was really frustrated with something and he reacted out of that. And because I'm only focused on you didn't get a green, now I
right,
have now created this idea in his head that we're not going to address what really went on or what you're really struggling with or frustration management. I just want you to get a green.
right.
So just kind of checking in with your kid. And something that I've noticed, instead of asking how was your day, asking what happened today that was different, or what was a good part of your day,
Mm,
what was a not so good part of your day.
I
Not
like that.
have a good or a bad day. So that helps out, especially if you don't, if you don't support the kids being a part of SEL, that's cool, that's fine, but just do some things to kind of communicate so we know how to address it without, crossing those boundaries.
I like that question on what part of your day was different because again, adults are already struggling with communication as well. So I'm like, yes, they are encouraged to go to therapy, adults, but let's keep it a buck. It's a bunch of adults not going.
Mhm.
It may look like it's popular. It may look like because you have a few podcasts or whatever, but in the real rural areas or just
Mhm.
middle America, they are not going to therapy. So, communication may not be a priority. It's just I was taught how to, speak like this, or I was spoken to like, do this or do that, and that's it.
Mhm.
Um, and I thought I find it interesting because I was gonna ask you this, what do I call it? A throwing you off question. Because I know I don't talk about politics a lot
Yeah.
because I choose to not talk about it a lot. But I'm finding a lot of people having an issue with how certain candidates are communicating. And we have one, candidate that's communicating a certain way, which is like the old school way. Then you have another candidate kind of saying the same things in each interview that she has. So when you have kids that see this and they're growing up and they're seeing like the tit for tat in this political campaign and um all these things, what do you think that looks like to the children growing up today? Because when we used to see political campaigns, there was more of, I would say they were better at lying.
They put on a
They
good
were
poker
better,
face.
yeah, they were better at debating because I took debate class and I'm like, you're not supposed to be emotional really when you're trying to get a point across. Um, but what do you think? How do you think that affects our children growing up today? Do you think they're paying attention to it? Do you think the parents are actually talking to them about the political climate that's going on? What are your thoughts?
I don't think so. I don't think, and if they
Okay.
are, it's because they have access to social media, so it's going to come across. Um,
Mm.
no, I don't think they are having those conversations about the
Do you
climate.
think it's important for them to have it?
I do actually. I do.
Mhm.
Again, because if they are, let's say they are like plugged into social media, some kids are, they're seeing people just look at how they talk to each other. Look at how they're communicating with each other. So we're taking that same character, like, well, if those people are doing it and they grown folks, I'm gonna go to
Right.
school and I'm gonna do the same thing. I'm gonna lash out when I want to, but I'm gonna look cool while I'm lashing out. Or I'm just gonna be lashing out saying whatever comes
Mm.
off the top of my head with no thought in it. There is no pre-thought. It's just I'm just talking. I do think
Mm,
it's important to talk about it because I mean, and I'm sure my two youngest don't listen, but my oldest does. When we do have these
right.
conversations, she's aware of. She's like, "That's not how we supposed to talk to each other. We're not getting a point across. We just going around and
Yeah.
around and around in circles to get nowhere.
Yeah.
There's no goal."
Yeah. It I'm not gonna lie, it is hard to be a parent dealing with them
Mhm.
having so much access to social media and how people are talking, and people love authenticity, so there's some people on these social media platforms that just say what they want,
Mhm.
and people gravitate towards it, they get attention for it, and then your child sees that and they're like, well, I can do that too, and go to school with it, but you get consequences in school, like you get sent to the office, or
Mhm.
worse, like you could get written up, lunch detention. So I'm kind of like observing, what is the balance here? Like, is there ever going to be a balance? Because it doesn't seem like it's getting better. Uh, I don't know.
I don't think I don't think there is a balance because they're seeing it on social media. Some of it is in their
Yeah,
home. And I know, like, there's the new wave of the whole gentle parenting thing as well. And I think that's also a part of this whole mix of kids kind of like, I say that it aids in emotional regulation in some situations and emotional dysregulation in some situations.
mm,
Because
mm,
some kids learn that, oh, my mom, is hurt when I say these things. So they're not authentic when they should be authentic because they don't know how to be without hurting someone. And then those times when they are authentic and their parents are like authentic back with them, then they think like it can come off combative when they're in school to other adults, like um,
right.
when they are trying to communicate how they feel. Even so, I'll even look at my situation, my parenting. My husband and I, like with Chris, like his way of parenting could be very much old school sometimes, depending
Mm-hmm.
on the situation. And I'm more of like, let's hear our kids out. But
Right.
understand that there
Same.
are like I might not agree with you. I want to hear you out because I really want you to be able to express yourself. But he's very much
Right.
like, no, I said what I said, this is how it is. Where
Mm-hmm.
and he can be nurturing in when he says it. But when and I'm speaking on Amaya because she's older, when she goes out and she's communicating to other adults, she's very aware, she's very emotionally aware. Um,
Yeah.
and it really sometimes turns some adults. She's gotten in trouble in school because of it. She doesn't get in trouble at
Right.
home. And it wasn't disrespectful. It's just like what you said made me uncomfortable. I don't like what you said and how you said it to me. It made me uncomfortable because she's
Oh
allowed to
yeah.
say that at home, but then at school you can't say that. You know.
Right. Right. Yeah. And I do find with the continuation of the politics, because it is election year, and I don't see the education component talked about too much, if at all. I know that they have the Project 2025, and it is an education component in that, but I mean, honestly, from an education standpoint, what would be the best approach for the new president or the president coming in? What would you say they should really tackle or implement within their agenda? Because it just seems to be left out. There are people working on the ground that are part of these administrations, and they're doing what they need to do. But from a broader stance, how am I supposed to know that, sitting at home, I don't really know who's doing what. So when you're getting on debating, or you're getting on in public in general, the education component is not coming up. There's more so like the small businesses, middle America with the factories, certain topics that we're used to. But what would you say should be the best approach for either candidate when it comes to education? because it seems to be getting worse.
Well, in my lane with the mental health part,
Yes.
you're going to need mental health professionals in your school. I think we think that now that we're like 4, almost 5 years post COVID, that we're back to normal in a sense, and it's not.
Mm,
It's not. It's not. The learning loss that you see has driven the behaviors up worse because I didn't learn when I was at home, or I didn't learn to the capacity that I needed to learn when I was at home. And so now I'm amongst peers who are who might have been able to remain steady. And
right.
so I have to act out. Yes, I'm on a live. So do you need anything? Okay. Um so I think that they need to address that. We do need mental health professionals in the schools. I mean, school counselors, I'm not saying that they're not. Some of them are licensed and they do, as much as they can, but you need people that like are licensed mental health professionals, like that's their specialty because that addresses that behavior. Um they're more aware of the resources that's necessary because not everything is a learning disorder. We like to chalk
Right,
it up
right.
to that, but not
Hmm.
everything is a learning disorder. Some of it is trauma, and let's just be realistic about it. It
Yeah.
affects their education. So you need
Hmm.
to address having mental health professionals in the school. For
Are they quick to say the learning disability more so than saying it's trauma?
yes, you will see a lot of times it's like, oh, they're probably acting like that because they struggle with reading. Or they could be acting like that
Mm,
because home is really a stressful place for them, or something somewhere may have been missed by somebody.
right, right.
You know,
Okay. Yeah.
But we see that a lot. And I mean, and there is a correlation to that too. There are some kids who, it is a learning disorder. I'm not saying that it's not, but
Right.
everything is not
Mhm.
a learning disorder, not a disorder. Some kids just learn different. We have to take
Right.
that into account too, because what I might do with a student, and like I said, I try to help teachers out when I'm doing like working one on one with a tier 3 student. If I know that they struggle with reading, normally I will incorporate some type of reading into our individual session to help
Right.
them. Even if it's
Right.
minimal reading or writing where I'm helping them spell or giving them tips while I'm also, because that builds their confidence too. Because if they struggle with reading and I'm a behavior problem, now I'm getting this lady up in here talking to me about my behavior, but she's also helping me feel more confident in reading class. I'm less likely to go back in reading class and act a fool because somebody took some time out to help me at least feel like I'm getting a win today.
Exactly. Yeah. So with that being said, here's the other component that I kind of, when I was doing the research to social emotions, the arts play a big role in helping kids express themselves and feel relaxed to do so in a short summary. Where does this lie where there's some, education systems that have completely cut that component out, or there's some that's still trying to have it, but they've kind of scaled it back to almost non-existent. I really feel like that should be something that shouldn't be cut. Somehow, like you said, the mental health professionals, somehow they need to like contract some artists in all sectors, not just painters or anything like that, like singers. They need to do something to get, that visual effect in front of the kids. What are your thoughts on that? Does
I
your education system kind of like have that, or is it cut completely, or is it,
I mean, they
you
still
know,
have it. It's called specials. They call them like their specials, right? It depends on different
interesting?
schools. I know some kids, some campuses where teachers feel like it's an incentive. So if you cut up in my class, I won't let you go to specials because I know that's something that you really want to do. But then I'm like, are you really helping or are you hurting? Because now I got to sit in here with you and it feels like a punishment And I really like my art class, or I really like going to music class, and we were going to do something fun, which might have turned around my entire day and my behavior had I been allowed
Right.
to go. So I do think it's important. And I've seen kids who look forward to going to that because it is relaxing for them. Sitting in a classroom for 50 minutes is a lot of stress. It's a lot of stress. So
Yeah.
being able to go somewhere where I can free flow, even though there is a curriculum and things I have to do, but it's a little bit less stressful. You're not looking to
Mhm.
me to, pass a test. I mean, they might do something in like art or music
Right.
or something, but it's fun and it's a little bit more free flowing and lenient to where I'm not stressed about, oh, if I don't do well on this art exam, I'm gonna fail, or oh, I
Right.
really can't read, now I'm in art, and if I mess up, then I
Hmm.
mess up. That's like that. Those are those classes that they do bring a balance, I think.
Right.
For mental health, they bring a balance.
Yeah, because it does help both of your exercise both sides of your
Both of
brain.
your brain, yep.
Because I feel like sometimes in the school environment, you're only allowed to do one. So you got to be left-brained through the whole day, and then a small, small, small gravitation towards right brain.
Mhm.
I think it's right brain. I have to fact check. It's like left brain is more
Hold on, let's look this.
your, yeah, because I'm like,
I want to
I
get the.
I posted this before.
I want to say right
Uh,
brain is creativity.
yeah.
Versus
Okay, yes. Your left
left
brain
brain
is more the logical, analytical side. Um, and then the right brain,
is your more creative and intuitive side.
right. So when that's shut off and they can't use their imagination, it's like it becomes almost non-existent in their life. And so when I come as an art teacher, it's like pounding the paint. You're like, come on, y'all. And they're just sitting there staring at you like, I
What?
don't know what this is. Like, I know music, I know some songs, but you're not, I don't know how to do this instrument. I don't want to, paint. I don't want to, I just want
Mm,
to do what I want.
yeah,
And that's kind of painful, because I'm like, it's getting younger and younger where they
it
start
is.
this. It used to be high school, now it's becoming middle school, now it's becoming elementary, now it's like,
Hmm.
where is this going? So I don't know if you could give any advice to other creatives that really want to go in the education sector, whether it's getting their foot in the door or trying to come up with something that could compensate for what's lost. Do you have any pointers or thoughts?
I think you do a really good job of it because you make it fun when you do your art with books and like
Wasn't
incorporate.
trying to make it about me.
No, but I get it. But I'm saying you're a perfect example of how that can be implemented though. So let's say you do a person wants to go in and like, hey, I want to be the music teacher in school.
Right.
How can I help you know, manage the socio emotional part of it, talk about how different rhythms affect our brain waves, different rhythms, and they may not understand brain waves, but like how different
Right.
rhythms affect our heartbeats and things like that. That's actually a tactic that we use in therapy when someone's heart is really racing. Put your hand over your heart. Where's your heart feel
Mm,
like? Feel like, and tell me the taps. Show me the taps. That's
mm.
incorporating music with emotional regulation because at that point
Right.
I'm learning to regulate my heartbeat with a skill. You're a
Yeah.
PE teacher and you know that you have a kid who's particularly, um, they might be very, very, very hyper. On paper, they might be ADHD or they struggle with focusing. Give them tasks to do in the gym. Like, hey,
Right.
tell me how your body feels right now. Oh, it feels like kind of like this. Okay, what if you run from here and back? How you feel now? I did that a lot, incorporating that, and that I didn't even realize like PE teachers, like they the goats. Like all the special
Yeah.
teachers are the goats, but
Yeah.
teachers for sure because that's a lot of regulation you're doing. You're teaching behavior
Yeah.
and discipline. That's mental and emotional regulation too, because
Right.
tell you got to go compete. You got to be on a team with a person you don't like. So now you're having to learn how to regulate your emotions and work together as a team. So doing stuff like that, just
Right.
and also, I mean, like even with the art teacher, utilizing your colors, you know, explaining to them what different colors could represent. Because I don't think I was
Yes.
ever taught that until I went to got my master's
Right.
and kind of
Right.
learned art therapy. But I feel like if they start teaching kids that young, that'll help kids realize, hey, I'm feeling more intentional about using red today. I might, you may not be mad,
Right.
but that might be calming for you. I don't know.
Yeah.
So
I
just
mean, that's honestly how I get dressed in the morning. I'm like, I don't want to, like, I literally use my imagination to like think about what I want to wear. I don't know if everybody does that, but I do that because I'm like, okay, I'm in like an earthy mood. So I'm gonna wear like,
Mhm.
fall colors or whatever. I'm in like I was supposed to wear a hoodie that said happy and I skirted foundation on it. It's all white. So I was upset about that, but I was cheery. So I wanted to put on the white with the colorful letters. Like I think we should never lose that as adults. And I'm not talking about inner childhood, but I'm saying we should just always learn to use our imagination still
Yeah.
throughout adulthood.
I think it gets lost when they're key, and especially like you said in school, you're forced to switch between left brain, right brain. Like, hey, I just left out of math, which I'm left brain. Now I'm about to go. I'm about to go
Oh
into
yeah, that's
art and music, and so now that's right brain. And I know that
true.
sometimes schools are
Yeah.
intentional about building schedules like that. Like catching older
Mm,
kids early in the morning because by the afternoon they might not want to participate. But I think we also need to just bring it into the classroom too, because again, that's emotional regulation. If they know that they
right.
don't do well in the morning, some kids just don't do well in the morning. Giving them that freedom
Hmm.
and that space first thing in the morning. If you know
You know
that,
now.
yeah, yeah. Like I'm telling you, I've
Hmm.
had kids like they don't do well with the transition coming from home to school. So we
Yeah.
have to be like, okay, well, you can eat breakfast in here and then, and preface them with the transition. And they tend to have a better day. But then I have some of the
Right.
kids that they get to about 10, 11 o'clock and they tapped. Like, that's all my brain can take of math and,
Mhm.
and reading. And I want to go do something else.
Right.
So being a bit more lenient in the classrooms, and I know teachers are crunched. I
Yeah.
I feel for them. Admin are crunched.
Yeah.
It's scary, but kind of finding a way to implement it within the lesson is
Hmm.
gonna be pivotal. So,
Now, I know we've been on here, but I just want to ask about, are there still after school programs that are implemented? I do want to shout out one of these programs that I had the pleasure of working with, judging for, Black Girls Don't Get Love. It is a nonprofit that goes into schools, high schools specifically, and they have a middle school component. And the Black girls are the priority for this nonprofit, but everyone of all backgrounds gets to participate in a writing competition. So the 4 weeks they get to learn about what it is to write a script, how to really formulate their writing, and do all these things. So I really just fell in love with that idea and like kind of had a piece about, okay, there's people still trying to, get these things in the school. And she's only the creator of this is only like 20 five. I don't
wow.
even know if she's 25 yet, but she might see this. But I wanted to bring that up because I don't see that anymore or hear any like parents talking about that. So is that still in the school or what is really the compensation for what's lacking?
So I know in elementary schools, a lot of elementary schools do still have like after school programs, and it's typically like K through 5.
Okay.
Um, they won't go lower than K. But I know once they get to middle school, it gets a bit trickier because the focus starts to shift more on athletics than anything. So
Oh,
you don't really
that's what
hear
you told me
much.
earlier.
Yeah,
Yes.
so you
Please
don't really hear
explain
much.
that. Explain that for the
So
audience.
I don't know about anywhere else. I can speak for Texas. You cannot actually like play a sport like in school
Mhm.
or represent a school team until you are technically seventh grade. Some have like sixth grade teams, but they don't. They play like amongst themselves. But like seventh grade. So
Okay.
typically that's when the boys, when they get to about fourth grade, they realize they're getting closer and closer and closer to middle school. Their focus starts to shift because I want to play football. And so the focus is on more on their athletics than it is academics. And so once they get to middle school, if you become like a really good football player, teachers are not, I mean, they'll tutor you, but they're most likely just going to be focused on you making it to practice, not, the fact that you're barely passing math class. If you're passing it with like a 70, okay. But
Wow.
yeah. And so there are middle schools that have clubs and stuff, but nothing that's, it's just really hard to get them in because now schools are very, it's mostly the communities are very particular about what they want you to do. They make it very hard on what you can and what you cannot do. So a lot of community organizations just don't. But I know,
Right.
like, for us, our Fort Worth after school program, K through 5, they participate in like all kinds of things. Yeah,
Okay. So as they get older,
you see less after
less.
school and more athletics.
So do you think they place pressure on the athletics department to kind of teach these
Hmm.
communication skills or
Yeah,
social emotions?
they do because it's like now it becomes a discipline more than anything. I ain't remember
Okay.
for her.
So it's only that's why you see sometimes athletes are only implementing it when they're playing the game,
Hmm.
but off the
They don't
courts
know
and
how to
off
manage
the
their
field.
emotions. They
Yeah,
don't know how to manage it. Yeah, they don't know how to.
yeah.
It's like I gotta hold it together during the game, or I'm allowed to express my frustrations a certain way during a game. But once the game is over,
Is that a little toxic? I'm
it
not
is. It
okay.
is.
Because I wasn't one to be keeping up with the sports world in a sense of like wanting to play. Like I stopped playing sports after right before middle school,
Hmm.
and I just wasn't interested no more. So I had friends that were athletes, and I did see a little bit of favoritism. Especially in high school where they would get, teachers buying them lunch and
Hmm.
doing some things, you're like, why is everybody else not getting that treatment? But I do feel that they shouldn't put that completely on sports um programs because I'm like, what if the child is not interested in sports? They're gonna take it out on the coach
Yeah.
and the other kids. Well, the other kids first, probably.
Yeah.
Um, and that's a danger.
And then you'll see the parents getting mad at the coach, and then what you
Right.
doing, my child, and all the things. This is why I'm like, also, if you know that a kid is like not into sports, don't put them in sports for the sake of disciplining them. Because I know some parents do, hoping that
Well,
it. And for some kids, they need it. I can agree they might need that extra, but that doesn't
yeah.
work for every single kid to put them in a sport just to help with discipline, and
Yeah,
accountability.
because if you're not, I feel like if you're not disciplining or you haven't set that standard and you throw them into a social environment where they gotta like that's a lot of anxiety. Think
Hmm.
about that. Like they gotta understand who they're doing the sport with and the coach. style of discipline, and then they're like, well, I'm not getting this at home, like,
Yeah.
so I gotta be see 4 people throughout the day,
Yeah.
one person at school. So it's really there's a lot that we can discuss about, but I'm so happy we were able to get one about this because I didn't know. Again, I just have been thrust. I'm like, how did I get here? But I do really think the arts component is lacking. And everyone's not an artist like me where I want to actually help the children. There's, different visual artists that just don't really go into education. But I know for me growing up, I always had that component as a child.
Mm-hmm.
So I knew how important it was to be able to go to the library, look at these books, use my imagination, not feel condemned for
Mm-hmm.
using my imagination. I just know how important it is to have both of those sides of your brain being used, really.
Mm-hmm.
So anything else you want to add? You want to shout your workbook out again? I do want to say this conversation is brought to you by my new children's book. I kind of got chewed out about the statistic I put up of children not reading. And I found within my research that they're not really doing phonics anymore in
You
school.
don't.
I didn't know that.
No, I
I
learned
did not know.
Amaya teaches me a lot because we were talking about cursive writing. And she's like, Mom, they don't teach us that. What?
What? That was my whole 3rd grade. Like I had I'll never forget that class. Let me bring up the name of it. Because I have so much going on. I forgot the name of the daggone book. Um, it's ABC's on the Loose. Hold on. And if anyone has any questions, they can ask in the comments. I'm not looking in the comments right now, but it's ABC's on the Loose and exploration of art, rhythm, and rhyme. And the book actually rhymes so the children can know how to have it stick in their brain. You know how like kids listen to music and I knew how I was. I would, get it like that when it was rhyming. But if you give me something that wasn't rhyming, I was like,
What?
okay, I'm slow to comprehend this. So I did this book just, on a whim to really implement the reading skills and helping them learn how to read because there is a lot of children that don't know how to read, and it's for all different kinds of reasons. It's not just because the parent is not reading with them. It's not the same for everybody. So, and I do want you to shout out your workbook again, so that people know that you do have for adults and children.
Yes. So for the adults, understanding mental health through a relationship with God. Yes, Audrey. Okay. Okay. She is very,
I
yeah.
was trying to put
And then
no, you're
for
good.
the kids, it's for, yes. She wants. Okay. Go with Amaya. And for the kids is a coping skills workbook for kids. So it encompasses different emotions and characters for kids to color. It's a journal writing part of really big lines to help them with sentence structure and handwriting. And it also includes coloring pages. So if you have like a little one who may not be able to write just yet, they got coloring pages. And so
Good.
uh,
Yeah. So we're out here working.
I'm
Uh,
trying. I'm trying.
yeah. But yeah, we wanted to get on here and talk about understanding social emotions. Again, if you have any questions, you can obviously contact Lakili, Mrs. Hampton, her education school name. Or you can contact her about her workbook. Please support, because it is scary to put yourself out here outside of the structures of and the systems that the world has in place. But yeah, anything else you want to add about this topic?
Y'all support your school social workers. I'm just saying from
Yeah,
personal experience. Support your school social workers. Like we
they're
do
going through
we do a lot in these streets. It may not seem like it, but we do.
it.
We
Yeah,
do.
yeah. And this will be put up on my YouTube channel. So you can go like and subscribe to Kristen Nicole Mann. It will be put on there, and then it will be left up on Facebook. And if you have any suggestions of who I should talk to next about maybe the same topic, whatever, I am going to get someone on here to talk about food stamps and being on the social services and what it does. So that'll be a little bit
I was
controversial.
about to say,
We were
ooh.
supposed we were supposed to been do that, but with all the stuff that's coming out now, I think it's good for now.
It is.
And it's perfect timing because so many people just are going through it. So thank you for joining us. Go get those workbooks, go get my book. I will put the link, and you want to put any link in the comment you can, because
Okay.
I think you have to message Zakili if you want her workbook and the workbook for the kids. So
Yes.
thank you for joining, and have a good, what's today? Wednesday?
It's Wednesday.
Oh my gosh.
It's
I was
hump
gonna say
day. It's hump day.
have a good hump day. Okay. Talk to you later.
Bye.
Bye.